Marine Lance Corporal Jessica Rodriguez felt the familiar weight of her radio equipment as she adjusted the straps on her pack. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty Afghan valley, and she could hear the distant chatter of her squad preparing for another patrol. At 23, Jessica had been deployed for 8 months, serving as the primary radio operator for Alpha Company's 2nd Platoon. Her calm demeanor and quick thinking had earned her the respect of her fellow Marines, though she never sought attention or praise. The mission briefing had been routine escort a convoy of supplies to a remote outpost near the Pakistani border. Intelligence suggested minimal enemy activity in the area, but Jessica knew better than to trust such assessments completely. She had learned to trust her instincts more than reports from higher command, especially after previous missions had gone sideways despite being labeled low risk. Her job was to maintain communication between the convoy, the outpost, and command headquarters back at base. As the convoy of 3 armored vehicles rolled out of the forward operating base, Jessica rode in the middle vehicle, her radio crackling with routine check-ins. The landscape was desolate but beautiful in its own harsh way. Rocky outcroppings jutted from barren hills. An ancient terraced field spoke of a time when this land had been more hospitable. She watched the terrain carefully, noting potential ambush points and escape routes, habits that had become second nature during her deployment. The first hour passed without incident. Jessica maintained regular contact with all units, her voice steady and professional as she relayed position reports and status updates. The convoy moved at a steady pace along the winding mountain road, kicking up clouds of dust that hung in the still air. Local children occasionally appeared along the roadside, waving at the passing vehicles, their faces curious but cautious. Then everything changed in an instant. The sharp crack of a rifle shot echoed through the valley, and Jessica felt a burning sensation tear through her left shoulder. The impact spun her around in her seat, and she immediately tasted blood in her mouth. Her training kicked in even as pain flooded her system. She had been hit by sniper fire. The convoy had driven into a carefully planned ambush, and she was the first casualty. Despite the shock and pain, Jessica's mind remained clear. She could hear her squad members shouting orders and returning fire, but she knew their situation was desperate. The sniper had chosen his position well, commanding a clear view of the road with multiple escape routes. Without precise coordinates for the enemy position, her squad would be fighting blind, vulnerable to additional attacks from hidden positions throughout the valley. As blood soaked through her uniform, Jessica realized she might be the only one who could save her squad. She had seen the muzzle flash from the sniper's position, and her training in artillery spotting meant she could calculate the approximate coordinates. But first, she needed to survive long enough to radio for help. Marcus Thompson had been serving as a staff sergeant for 6 years when he was assigned to Alpha Company. A veteran of 2 previous deployments, he had developed a reputation for keeping his Marines alive through careful planning and aggressive tactics when necessary. When he heard the sniper's shot and saw Jessica slump forward in her seat, his first instinct was to call for immediate medical evacuation. But he quickly realized they were trapped in a kill zone with limited cover and no clear escape route. The convoy had been moving through a narrow section of road with steep embankments on both sides. The lead vehicle had already taken several hits, and the driver was struggling to maintain control. Marcus could see muzzle flashes from at least 3 different positions, suggesting a coordinated ambush by multiple enemy fighters. His squad was pinned down with minimal cover, and their heavy weapons were having difficulty targeting the enemy positions due to the extreme angles and rocky terrain. Marcus crawled toward Jessica's position, keeping low as bullets whined overhead. He found her conscious but pale, blood flowing steadily from her shoulder wound. Her radio equipment had been damaged in the initial attack, but she was frantically trying to establish communications with headquarters. Her hands shook as she worked with the controls, but her voice remained steady and professional despite her obvious pain. "Jessica, we need to get you out of here," Marcus shouted over the gunfire. "The medic is working his way over, but we're taking heavy fire from multiple positions." He could see the determination in her eyes, even as she struggled to stay conscious. She had always been one of his most reliable Marines, never complaining about difficult conditions or dangerous assignments. Now she was wounded and still trying to do her job. "I can get coordinates for the sniper," Jessica whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "I saw his position when he fired. If I can reach artillery support, we can neutralize the threat." Marcus realized she was right. Their only chance of survival was to call in precise fire support to eliminate the enemy positions. But Jessica was losing blood rapidly, and he wasn't sure she would remain conscious long enough to complete the radio call. The enemy fire intensified, and Marcus could hear the distinctive sound of rocket-propelled grenades being launched toward their position. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and he knew they had only minutes before the enemy fighters would attempt to overrun their position. Jessica was their only hope for survival, but she was critically wounded and fading fast. Marcus made a decision that would haunt him for years afterward. Instead of focusing on Jessica's medical needs, he chose to prioritize the mission and the survival of his entire squad. He helped Jessica stabilize her radio equipment and provided cover while she attempted to establish contact with artillery support. It was a calculated risk that could cost Jessica her life, but it might be their only chance to save the rest of the squad. Colonel William Hayes had been monitoring routine radio traffic from his command post when the emergency call came through. As the senior artillery officer for the region, he was responsible for coordinating fire support for multiple units operating in the area. The initial report from Alpha Company's convoy indicated they were under heavy attack and needed immediate assistance, but the details were fragmentary and difficult to understand due to radio interference. Hayes immediately ordered his Fire Direction Center to prepare for a danger-close mission, knowing that friendly forces were likely within the minimum safe distance for artillery fire. Such missions required extreme precision and carried significant risk to the troops requesting support. He had conducted similar missions before, but each one brought unique challenges, and the constant fear of causing friendly casualties through miscalculation or communication errors. The radio crackled with Jessica's voice, weak but determined, as she attempted to transmit coordinates for the enemy positions. Hayes could hear the sound of gunfire and explosions in the background, and he knew the situation was desperate. Jessica's voice was professional despite her obvious pain, and she methodically provided the detailed information needed for accurate fire support. Her training and dedication impressed Hayes, even as he worried about her condition. "Fire mission over," Jessica whispered into her radio. "Grid coordinates 41 RPQ 12,340, 567,890. Enemy sniper position in rocky outcropping approximately 800 meters northeast of convoy position. Request immediate suppression. Danger close. Troops in contact." Hayes rapidly calculated the coordinates and realized the extreme difficulty of the mission. The target was on a steep slope, with friendly forces positioned dangerously close to the impact area. Hayes knew that a slight miscalculation could result in friendly casualties, but he also understood that without fire support, the entire convoy would likely be overrun. He made the decision to approve the mission, trusting in Jessica's coordinates and his own team's abilities. The next few minutes would determine whether his decision would save lives or cost them. As Hayes coordinated with his gun crews, he maintained radio contact with Jessica, who continued to provide updates on enemy movements and adjusted coordinates as needed. Her voice grew weaker with each transmission, but her information remained clear and precise. Hayes realized he was witnessing an act of extraordinary courage and professionalism under the most difficult circumstances possible. The artillery rounds impacted exactly where Jessica had directed them, and the enemy fire immediately ceased. Hayes felt a mixture of relief and admiration as he realized that Jessica's accurate coordinates had saved her squad's lives. But he also knew that her own survival remained uncertain, and he quickly arranged for medical evacuation to be dispatched to their location. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had been serving as a trauma surgeon at the field hospital for 3 months when Jessica's medical evacuation helicopter arrived. The flight medic's radio report had prepared her for a critical patient with a gunshot wound to the shoulder, but she was struck by Jessica's alertness and continued concern for her squad members. Even while being treated for her injuries, Jessica asked repeatedly about the status of her fellow Marines and whether the artillery mission had been successful. Mitchell quickly assessed Jessica's injuries and determined that the bullet had passed through her shoulder without hitting major blood vessels or organs. However, she had lost significant blood and was showing signs of shock. The wound would require surgery to clean and repair damaged tissue, but Mitchell was optimistic about Jessica's chances for full recovery. What impressed her most was Jessica's mental state. Despite her pain and trauma, she remained focused and coherent. During the initial treatment, Jessica continued to provide information about the ambush and her squad's tactical situation. Mitchell realized that Jessica's actions had likely saved multiple lives, and she was witnessing the aftermath of an act of genuine heroism. The combination of technical skill, courage, and selflessness that Jessica had displayed was remarkable, even by military standards. As Mitchell prepared Jessica for surgery, she learned more about the circumstances of her injuries. Jessica had been wounded in the initial enemy attack, but had continued to operate her radio equipment to coordinate fire support. She had provided precise coordinates for enemy positions while under fire and losing blood, enabling artillery strikes that eliminated the threat to her squad. Her actions had been instrumental in saving her fellow Marines' lives. Mitchell had treated many combat casualties during her deployment, but Jessica's case was unique. Most wounded soldiers focused primarily on their own survival and recovery, which was completely understandable. Jessica's continued concern for her squad members and her professional demeanor despite her injuries demonstrated a level of dedication that impressed everyone who encountered her. The surgery was successful, and Jessica's recovery progressed well. Mitchell visited her regularly during her hospital stay, partly for medical reasons, but also out of personal admiration for Jessica's courage. Their conversations revealed Jessica's humble nature. She consistently downplayed her own actions and emphasized the teamwork and training that had enabled the successful outcome. Mitchell recommended Jessica for appropriate recognition of her actions, knowing that such heroism deserved formal acknowledgement. She also ensured that Jessica received the best possible medical care and rehabilitation support. The bond between doctor and patient had evolved into mutual respect and friendship, based on their shared experience of life-saving service under difficult circumstances. Major Robert Chen commanded the investigation team tasked with documenting the ambush and Jessica's actions for potential awards and commendations. As a career infantry officer with extensive combat experience, Chen had seen many acts of courage and heroism during his military service. However, Jessica's actions stood out for their combination of technical skill, courage, and impact on mission success. Chen interviewed all members of Jessica's squad and reviewed radio transcripts, medical records, and artillery fire data to reconstruct the sequence of events. The evidence clearly showed that Jessica's actions had been decisive in saving her squad's lives. Her accurate coordinates had enabled precise artillery fire that eliminated multiple enemy positions, and her continued radio operations under fire had maintained critical communications links. The investigation revealed that Jessica had been wounded in the initial enemy attack, but had immediately focused on her mission responsibilities rather than her own medical needs. She had calculated coordinates for enemy positions while under fire and losing blood, then transmitted this information clearly and accurately despite her deteriorating condition. Her actions had directly enabled the successful fire mission that saved her squad. Chen was particularly impressed by testimony from Jessica's squad members, who uniformly praised her professionalism and dedication. Staff Sergeant Marcus Thompson described Jessica as the calmest Marine under fire and credited her with saving multiple lives through her actions. Other squad members provided similar accounts of Jessica's courage and technical competence during the ambush. The artillery officer who had coordinated the fire mission also provided testimony about Jessica's performance. Colonel William Hayes described her radio transmissions as exceptionally clear and professional, despite the difficult circumstances. He noted that her coordinates had been accurate enough to enable danger-close fire support, which required extreme precision and trust in the forward observer's abilities. Chen's investigation also revealed that Jessica had refused medical evacuation until she was certain that her squad was safe and communications were restored. Her actions had gone far beyond normal duty requirements and demonstrated exceptional courage and dedication. The evidence clearly supported recommendations for appropriate recognition and awards. Based on his investigation, Chen recommended Jessica for the Bronze Star Medal with Combat V device, recognizing her heroic actions under enemy fire. He also recommended her for the Purple Heart for wounds received in combat. These awards would formally acknowledge Jessica's courage and sacrifice in service to her fellow Marines and her country. Captain David Wilson served as Jessica's platoon leader and had worked closely with her throughout their deployment. Wilson had always been impressed by Jessica's technical competence and reliability, but her actions during the ambush elevated his respect for her to an entirely new level. As her immediate superior, Wilson felt responsible for ensuring that Jessica's heroism was properly recognized and documented. Wilson had been monitoring the radio traffic during the ambush from the company command post and had heard Jessica's transmissions in real time. Her voice had remained steady and professional despite the obvious stress of combat and her injuries. Wilson realized that Jessica's actions had probably saved not only her immediate squad, but also prevented a larger tactical disaster that could have affected the entire company. In his testimony to the investigation team, Wilson emphasized Jessica's consistent performance throughout the deployment. She had never complained about difficult conditions or dangerous assignments, and she had always volunteered for additional responsibilities when needed. Her technical skills as a radio operator were exceptional, and her knowledge of artillery procedures had proven invaluable during the ambush. Wilson also noted that Jessica had repeatedly downplayed her own actions when discussing the ambush. She consistently emphasized the teamwork and training that had enabled the successful outcome, rather than focusing on her individual contributions. This humility and team-focused attitude were characteristic of Jessica's leadership style and had earned her the respect of her fellow Marines. The ambush had been a defining moment for Wilson as a leader. He had been helpless to assist his squad directly, and he had been forced to rely on Jessica's skills and courage to save her fellow Marines. The experience had taught him valuable lessons about leadership, trust, and the importance of having skilled and dedicated subordinates in critical positions. Wilson strongly supported the recommendations for Jessica's awards and commendations. He believed that her actions deserved the highest possible recognition, and that her example could inspire other Marines to similar levels of dedication and courage. Jessica's heroism had made him a better leader and had reinforced his faith in the Marine Corps values and training. Wilson maintained regular contact with Jessica during her recovery and continued to serve as her mentor and advocate. Their professional relationship had evolved into a lasting friendship based on mutual respect and shared combat experience. Jessica's example continued to influence Wilson's leadership style throughout his military career. Jessica's recovery at the field hospital progressed steadily, though she struggled with the psychological impact of the ambush more than the physical injuries. The memories of the attack replayed constantly in her mind, and she experienced nightmares and anxiety that interfered with her sleep. Dr. Mitchell recognized these symptoms as normal reactions to combat trauma and arranged for Jessica to receive counseling and support. The hospital staff treated Jessica with obvious respect and admiration, having heard about her actions during the ambush. Nurses and doctors frequently stopped by to check on her progress, and several asked to hear her account of the events. Jessica found this attention uncomfortable and preferred to focus on her recovery and return to duty with her squad. During her hospital stay, Jessica received numerous visitors from her unit and other military personnel. Her squad members visited regularly, bringing updates on their activities and expressing their gratitude for her actions. These visits reinforced Jessica's sense of purpose and reminded her why she had chosen to serve in the Marines. Colonel Hayes visited Jessica during her recovery to personally thank her for her actions and to explain how her coordinates had enabled the successful fire mission. He described the technical challenges of the Danger Close mission and praised her accuracy and professionalism under extreme conditions. His visit helped Jessica understand the broader impact of her actions and the lives she had saved. Jessica also received visits from senior officers who wanted to personally recognize her heroism. These meetings were awkward for Jessica, who remained uncomfortable with praise and attention. She consistently emphasized the teamwork and training that had enabled the successful outcome, rather than focusing on her individual contributions to the mission. The medical staff gradually cleared Jessica for light duty, though she would require several more weeks of rehabilitation before returning to full combat status. Her shoulder wound was healing well, but she needed physical therapy to restore full range of motion and strength. The psychological counseling was also helping her process the trauma of the ambush and develop coping strategies. Jessica's primary concern remained returning to duty with her squad. She wanted to resume her responsibilities as their radio operator and continue serving alongside the Marines she had fought to protect. Her dedication to her fellow Marines remained the driving force behind her recovery and her determination to return to combat operations. The awards ceremony took place at the Forward Operating Base 6 weeks after the ambush. Jessica stood at attention as the base commander read the citations for her Bronze Star Medal with Combat V device and Purple Heart. The ceremony was attended by her squad members, company officers, and other personnel who had heard about her actions. Jessica felt proud but also uncomfortable with the formal recognition of her heroism. The Bronze Star citation described Jessica's actions in detail, emphasizing her courage under fire and her decisive contribution to saving her squad's lives. The language was formal and impressive, but Jessica felt that it couldn't fully capture the teamwork and training that had enabled the successful outcome. She remained convinced that any Marine in her position would have acted similarly. Jessica's squad members cheered loudly when the medals were pinned to her uniform, and she could see the pride and gratitude in their faces. Staff Sergeant Thompson gave a short speech describing Jessica's actions and their impact on the squad's survival. His words were heartfelt and emotional, bringing tears to Jessica's eyes as she realized how much her actions had meant to her fellow Marines. The ceremony concluded with a reception where Jessica was congratulated by numerous personnel from throughout the base. She received praise from officers and enlisted personnel alike, all of whom had heard about her heroism during the ambush. The attention remained uncomfortable for Jessica, but she appreciated the support and recognition from her fellow Marines. Captain Wilson presented Jessica with a letter of commendation from the Marine Corps Commandant, recognizing her actions as exemplary of Marine Corps values and traditions. The letter would become part of Jessica's permanent record and would enhance her opportunities for promotion and advanced training. Wilson emphasized that Jessica's actions had brought honor to herself, her unit, and the Marine Corps. The local media also attended the ceremony, having heard about Jessica's story from military public affairs personnel. Jessica reluctantly agreed to a brief interview, though she continued to emphasize the teamwork and training that had enabled the successful outcome. Her humble and professional demeanor impressed the reporters and reinforced the positive image of Marine Corps personnel. Jessica returned to full duty with her squad shortly after the awards ceremony. The ambush had changed her perspective on combat and service, but it had also reinforced her commitment to her fellow Marines. She continued to serve as their radio operator with the same dedication and professionalism that had characterized her actions during the ambush. The remainder of Jessica's deployment passed without major incident, though she participated in several more combat operations. Her experience during the ambush had made her more confident in her abilities and more aware of her importance to the squad's success. She continued to train and prepare for future missions with the same intensity and dedication that had saved her squad's lives. Jessica's squad members treated her with obvious respect and gratitude, though they were careful not to make her uncomfortable with excessive praise. They had always respected her technical skills and professionalism, but the ambush had elevated their opinion of her courage and dedication. She remained an integral part of their team and continued to earn their trust and admiration. The psychological impact of the ambush continued to affect Jessica throughout the remainder of her deployment. She experienced occasional nightmares and anxiety, particularly during high-stress situations. However, the counseling and support she had received helped her develop effective coping strategies, and she was able to continue performing her duties at a high level. Jessica's actions during the ambush became legendary within Alpha Company and spread throughout the battalion. Her story was used as an example of Marine Corps values and the importance of technical competence in combat situations. New Marines arriving at the unit heard about Jessica's heroism and were inspired by her example of courage and dedication. The ambush and Jessica's response also influenced tactical procedures and training within the unit. Leaders emphasized the importance of maintaining communications under fire and the critical role of radio operators in coordinating fire support. Jessica's actions had demonstrated the life-saving potential of skilled and dedicated communications personnel. Jessica completed her deployment and returned to the United States for reassignment and leave. Her combat experience and demonstrated leadership had earned her opportunities for advanced training and promotion. She was recommended for sergeant and selected for the Marine Corps Advanced Radio Communications course, which would enhance her technical skills and career prospects. The transition back to civilian life during her leave was challenging for Jessica. She struggled with the contrast between the intensity of combat operations and the routine nature of civilian activities. The memories of the ambush and her wounded squad members remained vivid, and she found it difficult to relate to people who had not shared similar experiences. Jessica's family welcomed her home with pride and gratitude, having followed her deployment through letters and occasional phone calls. They had learned about her heroism through military channels and were amazed by her actions during the ambush. However, Jessica found it difficult to discuss her combat experiences with family members who couldn't fully understand the context and pressures of military service. During her leave, Jessica visited the families of her squad members to check on their welfare and maintain the bonds forged during their deployment. These visits were emotionally difficult but important for her psychological recovery. She needed to see that her actions had protected people she cared about and that her sacrifice had been worthwhile. Jessica also used her leave time to pursue counseling and therapy to address the lingering psychological effects of combat trauma. The transition from combat to civilian life required significant mental adjustment, and she recognized the importance of professional support during this process. Her military training had prepared her for combat, but not for the emotional challenges of returning home. The media attention surrounding Jessica's heroism continued during her leave, with requests for interviews and speaking engagements. She reluctantly agreed to some appearances, recognizing the importance of representing the Marine Corps positively. However, she remained uncomfortable with the focus on her individual actions rather than the teamwork and training that had enabled the successful outcome. Jessica's new assignment took her to Marine Corps Base Quantico for advanced training and eventual assignment as a communications instructor. Her combat experience and demonstrated expertise made her valuable as a trainer for new Marines learning radio procedures and artillery coordination. She embraced this role as an opportunity to pass on the skills and knowledge that had saved her squad's lives. The instructor position allowed Jessica to influence the training of future Marines and potentially save lives through improved education and preparation. She developed innovative training scenarios based on her combat experience, emphasizing the importance of maintaining communications under fire and the critical role of radio operators in coordinating fire support. Her students benefited from her first-hand knowledge of combat operations and her technical expertise. Jessica's teaching style was influenced by her combat experience and her understanding of the life and death importance of communication skills. She was demanding but fair, pushing her students to achieve high standards while supporting their development. Her reputation as a combat veteran and hero gave her credibility with students and fellow instructors alike. The training environment at Quantico was different from combat operations, but Jessica found satisfaction in preparing Marines for the challenges they would face in deployment. She knew that her instruction could make the difference between life and death in combat situations, and she approached her responsibilities with the same dedication that had characterized her actions during the ambush. Jessica's story continued to inspire Marines throughout the Corps, and she was frequently invited to speak at training events and ceremonies. These appearances remained uncomfortable for her, but she recognized their importance in maintaining Marine Corps traditions and values. Her humble and professional demeanor reinforced the positive image of Marine Corps personnel and their commitment to service. Years after the ambush, Jessica reflected on the events that had shaped her military career and personal development. The experience had taught her valuable lessons about courage, leadership, and the importance of technical competence in life and death situations. She had discovered strength and capabilities she hadn't known she possessed, and she had learned to trust her training and instincts under extreme pressure. Jessica's actions during the ambush had saved multiple lives and prevented a potential tactical disaster. Her accurate coordinates had enabled precise artillery fire that eliminated enemy positions, and her continued radio operations under fire had maintained critical communications links. The combination of technical skill, courage, and dedication she had displayed represented the best of Marine Corps values and traditions. The psychological impact of the ambush continued to influence Jessica's life and career choices. She had developed a deeper understanding of the costs of military service and the importance of supporting fellow Marines through difficult experiences. Her own recovery from combat trauma had taught her empathy and patience in dealing with other Marines facing similar challenges. Jessica's military career continued to flourish, with promotions and advanced training opportunities based on her combat experience and demonstrated leadership. She eventually reached the rank of staff sergeant and served in various communications and training roles throughout the Marine Corps. Her reputation as a combat veteran and hero opened doors and provided opportunities for advancement. The bonds formed with her squad members during the deployment remained strong throughout their military careers. They maintained regular contact and supported each other through the challenges of military life and eventual transitions to civilian careers. The shared experience of the ambush had created lasting friendships based on mutual respect and gratitude. Jessica's story became part of Marine Corps lore, told to new Marines as an example of courage and dedication under fire. Her actions during the ambush were studied in military schools and used as case studies in communications and artillery training. The technical and tactical lessons learned from her experience influenced doctrine and training throughout the military. The recognition Jessica received for her actions included not only military awards, but also civilian honors and speaking opportunities. She was invited to address veteran organizations, military academies, and civilian groups interested in military service and heroism. These appearances helped her develop confidence in public speaking and provided opportunities to represent the Marine Corps positively. Jessica eventually left active duty and pursued civilian career opportunities, though she remained connected to the military through reserve service and veteran organizations. Her combat experience and leadership skills translated well to civilian occupations, and she found success in telecommunications and emergency communications fields. The technical skills she had developed as a radio operator provided a foundation for her civilian career. The transition to civilian life was challenging but ultimately successful for Jessica. She had learned to balance her military identity with civilian pursuits, and she had developed coping strategies for managing the psychological effects of combat trauma. Her military experience had given her confidence and leadership skills that served her well in civilian occupations and community activities. Jessica's story continues to inspire Marines and other military personnel facing similar challenges. Her example demonstrates that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when faced with life-and-death situations. Her actions during the ambush showed that technical competence, courage, and dedication can make the difference between success and failure in combat operations. The ambush and Jessica's response had lasting impacts on military doctrine, training, and procedures. Her accurate coordinates and continued radio operations under fire highlighted the critical importance of skilled communications personnel in combat situations. Military leaders recognized the need for enhanced training and support for radio operators and other technical specialists. Jessica's humble and professional demeanor throughout her recognition and subsequent career exemplified the best qualities of military service. She never sought attention or praise for her actions, consistently emphasizing the teamwork and training that had enabled the successful outcome. Her example influenced countless Marines and other military personnel to pursue excellence in their own service. The story of Jessica Rodriguez and her actions during the ambush became a testament to the courage and dedication of military personnel serving in combat zones around the world. Her willingness to continue performing her duties despite serious injuries and extreme danger demonstrated the highest standards of military service and personal courage. Jessica's legacy extends beyond her individual actions to encompass the broader themes of service, sacrifice, and dedication to fellow service members. Her story illustrates the importance of training, teamwork, and technical competence in military operations, and it demonstrates that heroism can emerge from ordinary situations when people are willing to put others' welfare above their own safety. The coordinates Jessica whispered while wounded and under fire saved not only her immediate squad, but also prevented a larger tactical disaster that could have affected many more military personnel. Her actions had strategic as well as tactical significance, demonstrating how individual courage and competence can influence the outcome of military operations at multiple levels. Today, Jessica's story continues to be told in military training programs, leadership courses, and veteran organizations. Her example of courage under fire and dedication to fellow service members serves as an inspiration to new generations of military personnel. The lessons learned from her experience continue to influence military doctrine, training, and procedures designed to prepare personnel for the challenges of combat operations. Jessica Rodriguez's transformation from an ordinary Marine radio operator to a decorated combat hero illustrates the potential for extraordinary courage that exists within ordinary people. Her actions during the ambush demonstrated that heroism is not about seeking glory or recognition, but about doing what is necessary to protect others, even at great personal cost. Her story remains a powerful reminder of the courage and dedication of military personnel serving in dangerous situations around the world.